Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Tactics podcast, the show where each week we discuss a different topic or tangent and hear from you, our amazing community. I am James Jordan, aka The Bard, and today I am joined by Mr. Lawrence Baker, the Spider.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, jazz hands.
Yeah, well, I figured that was less threatening than the spider. So.
It's trying to soften it. It's because of your extra appendages.
Well, I tried to soften it because I'm next to a pair of slices of bread.
You've spoiled my next intro. It's Chaos Lord Beard. It's Joe pointing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lawrence Spider.
Birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Beautiful.
At time of filming, it is currently your birthday.
It is currently your birthday.
Very wonderful, and that was completely unexpected.
In this timeline right here.
And do you know what was also really funny?
Tell me.
When you started the happy birthday, I'd actually forgotten that it was my birthday.
It's been a very busy day.
It's been an exciting day.
It has. Well, we had, as of today, you probably have already seen this by now, we had an absolute gargantuan of the gaming industry.
A legend.
Co-founder of Games Workshop, Sir Ian Livingston, in the house.
Yes.
In the hill.
Right here, sat where you are.
A Knight of the Realm.
Spoke to him. Yeah, that's right.
What a cool guy as well.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a very nice man.
I'm still shell-shocked from that. I actually forgot it was my birthday.
It feels pretty weird. Like, you two had obviously the interview with him, but even just him being in our presence, and he came in and we had some sandwiches with him.
We did.
Chat. He praised my tea making abilities. I didn't know what to do after that. I was
And
like,
he's a northern lad.
he is a northern lad. He's one of my own. I was just like, I'll be your squire. And I didn't know what to do then. Well, that's made my year.
Signed some books for us, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Very cool.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Gentleman, just genuinely charming man.
Yeah.
It was really interesting as well to hear about it all from his perspective.
Yes.
Going all the way back to the beginning of Games Workshop and before Games Workshop.
Yes.
Before times, yeah.
But then that's kind of what's spawned the idea for this podcast.
Yeah, it has. It's something we were like, off the bat, like you guys, like, a little bit behind the curtain. How the sausage is made. You guys came out of the interview.
How the bread is made.
That tickled you, didn't it?
I've never heard anyone say that before.
Really?
How the sausage is made.
How the sausage is made.
If you listen to James long enough, you start to realise there's a lot of weird stuff that happens.
Someone's probably made a supercut of all the strangest things I've said.
Nearly made a right old mess.
But yeah, you guys came out of the room and it was amazing. We were like, bye, Ian, this is wild. Bye, have a lovely time. But then we were just discussing about some of the things he said in that episode, and some of the things just like chatting, and you've been chatting with him in general. It was like, you picked him up and he came in earlier. And it spawned this whole kind of conversation of some of the behaviours or how Games Workshop has changed recently, and how it sort of evolved from its very humble origins, I guess, into this now huge behemoth of a, multi-billion-dollar multinational company. And it got us thinking of like, it is weird, some of the things they're doing and some of the changes they're making and sort of the flattening of things and digitization and simplifying of stuff and just sort of odd decisions.
You see, I want you to expand on that because.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. This is not you hosting the podcast. Now I'm asking you a question.
The tables have been turned.
The tables are about to be flipped.
The sausage is coming for me.
Because back before we started rolling on this episode, whilst you were still slicing that sausage,
yes,
what you said was, getting your BlackBerry out, your ex-corporate background, because Bard used to work in a corporate background.
I did indeed.
Okay?
Sold millions of sausages.
There you go. Right. But here's the thing. You said something which I found quite interesting, because I've not been exposed to that way of thinking before. You said they're digitizing their assets. This is the language. They're digitizing their assets. They're simplifying their rules. Why is that significant?
And I think they are digitizing these things. They are simplifying everything, because if you were to sell something, if you were to make a product of something and say that thing was a huge colossus of a business with all of these people, all these departments and all these IPs and all these games, if you wanted to make that a desirable product for someone to buy, you'd want to simplify it to be like, this is Games Workshop as a whole package. Now might you Hasbro, or you Warner Brothers, or you Paramount, would you like to purchase this company and take all of our assets and be in command of our company, Games Workshop, and then all of those sales of all of these miniature sales would then become your profits and your assets? And that would be quite a sort of, quite an enticing offer. And I think the more and more I think about it, the more of decisions of Games Workshop is, at its core, 40k, its biggest selling, it's its top dog, right? But that is a hard thing. The elevator pitch for 40k, what is 40k, is like a rabbit hole of a question, right? Now, if you want to make that easy for someone to pick up and sell, you would probably make a lot of your rules digital. You start to move in that direction. You'd want to have a huge smash hit video game. You'd want to have a huge television series. You'd want to have more accessible miniatures, a more simplified design philosophy, and you'd probably want to have a more accessible rule set. So the question I said was, maybe, are they actually gearing up to sell? Is that, are they now? And also, I should caveat this. It sounds big and scary. It's like someone's trying to buy your house from under you. It's no, I think actually that can also be a very positive thing, because it might mean there's more assets, maybe more funding. Maybe you could pump, if say someone like Hasbro is like, cool, you're a $3 billion company, here's 40 billion, go crazy, make something really magical happen. So maybe they've sort of hit a ceiling of what they're able to produce, and maybe they are looking at expanding their walls, what they can do outside of their current sort of ecosystem. And it just makes you think, doesn't it?
It's very interesting, okay, because I had never once considered, and we should also caveat this by saying we know nothing about it. Planning of selling. This is this complete random hearsay. I'm not saying there's any remote truth to any of this.
This is complete
It's kind
theory.
of just an interesting conversation around what if and what would that mean in the future. But what I would say is this: I never thought about the flattening of all of these things as being
like intentional almost.
Yeah, and I think I always thought it's intentional because they're trying to make it accessible. But what does that mean? I never thought of it from the point of view as then that makes it more sellable as well. And until you sort of said that, and the thing which got me onto it when Joe and I were talking to Ian was, he ultimately sold his shares in the company, a company he co-founded. Couldn't have been, it was no small thing to do at the time. But by that point, he was a internationally best-selling author with the Fighting Fantasy series, had already created this legacy. And then it got me thinking about the people that created Warhammer along within Games Workshop when Ian and Steve were running it. Ultimately, Brian Ansell, who they hired as a managing director, who was the chief CEO of Citadel Miniatures, he's the one that thought up Warhammer.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll get to my point in a moment.
But
it is an interesting point.
Because he was wanting to expand the miniature range.
Right.
Yeah.
He wanted to give incentive to people not to just buy 1 or 2 miniatures for their D&D or RPG games, but he wanted to incentivize people to buy multiple miniatures, regiments, if you will, armies, because of course that would mean scale selling, right? So it's a good business move. Let's sell them an army, not just one figure. And so he came up with Warhammer to effectively use as a mechanism to sell lots of miniatures.
Yeah.
Okay, which Ian said they were going to give away for free in White Dwarf.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, just rules for free in White Dwarf, and apparently it was so popular that they were like, well, actually, there was so much more demand for refinement and fine-tuning the rules that's when Brian got Hallowell and Priestley involved in writing the original Warhammer. So they all wrote it together.
Yeah.
But it was his concept, the Realms of Chaos, which he obviously took from various other fantasy tropes. Exactly. We have the book over here. The book is gone. It's there somewhere. Anyway.
Which one?
The original Warhammer Fantasy is over there on the left.
Hello.
Yep. Now, ultimately, the book was developed and they monetized it and they sold it. They created a rule set, and with that rule set, They wanted to flesh out the lore. And at that point, this is where something creative's really happening. So not that the miniatures weren't creative, they had all of these amazing characters, but they didn't have any history at that point. Then with the rules came the lore. A world starts forming. Something that starts capturing the imagination of people, okay? And a movement starts to begin. And it expands rapidly, you know, and as Ian was saying, I think they did like a few thousand units, they sold out of that, they needed to reprint again, you know, and they just couldn't, Warhammer just kept
keep up
expanding.
that demand, yeah.
Then around 87, Priestley came up with the idea for Warhammer 40,000, or if he didn't come up with the idea, he certainly was the one that developed Rogue Trader.
Yeah, he was the main.
Yeah, and he was the one that did that rule set. Still borrowing the concept of the realms of chaos, putting it into so that they could sell their scythe. Remember, back then they were called space orcs, space elves, you know, space dwarves. You know, it was like basically taking fantasy characters and putting them into space. In space, and you know, then that world started to develop, and that lore started to, you know, become embedded in people's psyche, and then ultimately, because truly that was then actually an original piece of writing. And by that, not that Warhammer Fantasy is an original, but it took and reused quite a lot of existing tropes in the fantasy genre and melded them, and then came up with some cool new ideas as well. But ultimately, you know, it was familiar.
Yes.
Whereas the world of Warhammer 40,000 was really something else, and nothing else was quite like it. I suppose you maybe could say it's got elements of Dune in there, sure, but you know, ultimately taking knights, giving them guns. And then putting it in an almost biblical-esque setting in the far future was pretty unique. I can't think of anything that preceded it which was quite like that.
Having a very medieval monastical element to it,
giving space soldiers swords and shields is also mad.
Exactly.
You think about it, but
exactly.
I think about the trailer for the new Doom game.
Yes.
Doom in medieval land, whatever it's
called. Oh yes, it's like the before times.
No one was like, whoa, look at that gun. When he got that sword out, everyone was like, whoa, he's got a sword. Swords are cool.
Swords are cool.
Especially when they're in space.
They are. You know, blending fantasy with science fiction is just a bit of a winner. And obviously then that started to dwarf Warhammer Fantasy. Now I'll finally get to my point. Your Rick Priestley's, Brian Ansell sadly passed away, you know, the original primogenitor actually of Warhammer. You have to give the original credit to him. But your Hallowells, your Jervis Johnsons, your Andy Chambers, the people that then came after, very quickly after, or worked with them initially, have all since now moved on from Games Workshop. John Blanche is retired. Absolutely critical in capturing the art and the universe for that time.
And so often the artists just aren't credited, and they sort of get lost. But John Blanche is really special because he almost sort of like surpassed all of that and sort of became his own legend.
He did,
in the whole,
you know. But again, the lore and Blanchitsu are literally just entwined. You know, he created Grimdark, you know, or at least he visualized the concept of it. But now he's retired. Basically, all of the original primogenitors who've made Warhammer and 40k what it is are no longer there. So what does that mean? So then I had a thought. I was like, well, what does that mean then? Well, that means that effectively you have a board of people which are now the caretakers, if you like, but they're not the original creators. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't create new things and add to the IP. In fact, that should be their sole job now. They should be the real caretakers, the guardians of this lore, and they continue to support it and build upon it, and et cetera, et cetera. But my guess is that if you don't have that original sense of ownership, or if there is no one true creative lead, and that they have all become sort of a bit beholden to each other or the corporate chain of command. Because this is what happens when things get too big. Like the best creative studios, you look at things like Baldur's Gate 3 apparently was an absolute raging smash hit. It is, and the studio is tiny. You know, Larry and you know, like all of these, like where creatives are allowed to get together and work with each other, bouncing off of each other without having to go through a bunch of, yes men and women to get to, well, we think that this would be a really brilliant concept. Oh, but that won't fit, so that's a no. They need to be allowed to, throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right? Now, if all of those people have now gone, and we're left with an effective corporate board. Now, I'm saying this not knowing any of them, and I'm sure that I hope that they are all massive fans and are, caretakers of the IP, but we don't know that. We could just have interested parties, which recognise Games Workshop are, a super affluent company, and it would be, it's worthwhile to be on the board because it makes them a lot of money. And if it's just purely money driven, you might lose some of that process. But here's where we get really interesting. It was at that moment I went, well, if any of these people ultimately, haven't created it, are not necessarily active in the writing of it, and are there for, the financial return, why couldn't Hasbro come along and go, well, here, board, here's an obscene amount of money. You will never, ever have to work again, nor will probably your family or your children's or your children's children or whatever it may be, but they'll get an obscene amount of money, and they can just go, well, that's it. I can just sort of disavow all responsibility. And then I was like, well, this is not uncommon. This happens
all the time. Yeah.
Because people either A, get bored, B, they felt like, oh, I'm done with that now. Yeah, I've done, I don't, or C, that they were never creatively beholden to what the project was anyway. And it was only from a completely sort of monetary or mercenary, if you want to put it that way, point of view. So yes, could Games Workshop sell? Well, in theory, it only takes the majority of the board, shareholders to agree.
It's quite an appealing portfolio of success and products that they have at this point. It's if you think about like a multimedia type offering, you've got the miniatures, but they don't make as much money as the IP does.
Right.
The money they make from video games with the Warhammer IP is massive. Like Space Marine 2's done really well. There's been a whole catalogue of Warhammer games up until now. Dawn of War is begging for the next game at this point, going off the back of Space Marine 2.
Warhammer Total War did really well.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got the we keep calling it the Henry Cavill Project. Sounds like a prog rock band.
That's a brilliant name for a band.
But that is, for all intents and purposes, still going forwards from what we know. There is one of the biggest sort of vaults of lore of any sci-fi genre is 40K. It looks very appealing. I think from an outsider, from like a big corporation that wants to expand their own portfolio, it looks like quite a tasty morsel, I think.
Right. What happens if, I just want to throw a name out there, let's just say Disney. Okay?
Well,
Disney buy it.
Well, this is the thing. I can't see Disney.
They want to make a whole bunch of TV series and films based on the IP. And then, of course, they'll have the miniature product range and all of the merchandising opportunity that could come off of those shows and all that sort of jazz.
They could make Saint Celestine a Disney princess.
I think this is the thing, right? Like, it's... Imagine that, you go to Disneyland, it's just like, would you like to take your photo with Cinderella? No, I want the living saint herself with the ardent blade.
The head's Tinkerbell, no.
Bird. But I think there's something to be said, and I think Disney's a prime example of, I think, there's a weird, especially in the last, what I would say, like 5 or 6 years, there's been a real sort of negative connotation with companies selling, right? Because everyone says, oh God, I hope they don't do a Disney in reference to Marvel or Star Wars. And before everyone's like, oh, but look what this, like, pull back your horses. The original Iron Man film, yes, that was under a different stewardship at the time of the IP, but was an amazing, when that film came out, the first Iron Man of the MCU, incredible.
I thought it was brilliant, right? Anyway,
Now, what did they do? They streamlined all their assets. They prepared for that sale of the IP, Marvel, to Disney, which then allowed the MCU to happen, which had Infinity War, Endgame, and all of that amazing media came out of that partnership of being like, you're right, if you have a board that is very much beholden to, we need to look after this company, but we have a maximum ceiling of the money we're making, right? That means every creative decision has to be weighed up for, that's a really big risk. Like if we do that wrong, we could stand to really hurt ourselves financially. And yes, we're talking about a huge company, and yes, they can weather some storms, But that next level up weirdly sometimes can allow you to have far more creative freedom because you can be more wacky, because you can do Guardians of the Galaxy, because if it's a flop, doesn't matter. You're locked in for a 7-movie deal.
That is a perfect example because one of the huge criticisms of Warhammer Plus and all of their great animations is one comes along every 9 to 12 months and it's about 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like they're really cool, but they can't afford to do it en masse.
It's too much of a gamble every time.
Yeah, but there's huge companies out there that could give the capital and the resource to make full movies, full series, etc.
Like,
imagine it's part of your Disney Plus subscription or Amazon Prime. That's what's going on.
So the Iron Man analogy is really interesting because if you compare that to the Iron Warriors and Drakari short, effectively what it was, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So if you think about it from the Iron Man point of view, maybe that could turn into a full series. And without that investment, it would never happen. So it might not be exactly what everyone wants, but it can actually exist rather than not.
That injection of funding being like, I quite like what you're doing here, but you as a smaller business, those decisions you're making are like, well, if this goes wrong, like we sometimes have that of like, we'd love to just cover everything, but if we can't keep the lights on, we can't make you TV. Yeah. And it's that same thing, Games Workshop are thinking like, wouldn't it be really cool to do a huge Dark Mech army and all this crazy art, make it really creepy and just all John Blanche artwork? Is it going to sell a certain number of units? Oh, I don't know. But if you've got huge overheads or minimal overheads because you've got a huge backer, take that risk, take that shot in the dark. Oh, well, that one didn't work, but I'm sure this new movie we're releasing next week will cover the shortfall. You can then suddenly take far more risks with the IP because you've got the backing to have a safety net. Whereas, so there are positives to this as well. It's not just going to be like, oh, that's it, they're going to ruin everything.
Yeah, right? It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely right. Yeah. But of course, I think it's fair to say that Star Wars is obviously a massive IP.
Perfect example,
I think it's also very fair to say there's lots of people out there. But it's also interesting, there's lots of people out there which love the new Star Wars stuff as well, by the way. That has to be acknowledged. Sam, for example, loves a lot of the new Star Wars stuff, who's been a guest on this show, whereas I don't like a lot of the new Star Wars stuff. But then there's stuff that I do really like from it, so it's like some series I think are really good, like I really enjoyed the first series of Mandalorian, for example. But I thought Rogue One was great, but I didn't really love the new trilogy.
Exactly.
But you're right. All of that stuff, because ultimately before that, George Lucas was just sitting on it.
Yeah.
So you weren't actually getting anything, really.
Yeah, exactly.
He did the prequel trilogy. Was the last thing that he did. But then you weren't getting anything, and there's this whole IP sat there with nothing being produced for it. And now Disney's taken it over, and now you've got loads of stuff being produced. Now, whether it's all good or not, that's a separate thing. I guess the real argument is it, and this is perhaps the point of the debate, I don't know, is it good to have allow things to be creatively split open that way so that you do get lots of collaborations from lots of different people adding to the IP and furthering its production? Or does that dilute it or change the canon too much? Or, well, I suppose that's the thing. It's hard to say. It depends who takes it on. It might work, it might not.
Precisely.
You might get a Rogue One, you might get you might get
Boba Fett.
The Force Awakens.
If you're enjoying today's video, then I have excellent news for you. Today's video joins a huge library of other podcast shows just like this one as a weekly benefit to our on-demand members. The podcast show is an opportunity for us to discuss different tales, topics, and tangents and hear from our amazing on-demand community as a reward for all of their support. They get to submit questions that we answer on the show. Available right now and instantly is over 60 episodes of podcasts just like this one. So if you want to sign up now for instant access to all of these episodes, head over to tabletoptactics.tv or download our app today. We'd love to have you there, chatting in the comments and submitting show ideas. Anyway, let's get back to today's episode.
This is one of the things when you open stuff up to a much wider audience, it's more difficult to please everyone. So there's going to be different types of shows, different types of people. And you're going to hear that, well, I didn't like this thing, but I really like this one. And then you have other people with the opposite taste.
Yeah.
So I think that's a natural thing that just happens when something gets huge. Like there'll be some bits that people like, some that they don't, and then either way, Disney's making money.
And I think it really depends on who you shop it to. And I think that's the key thing. Like that would have to be part of this conversation. I think is the hardest bit is like, if you sell it to a company that wants you to just make more, like keep milking it until it's dry kind of thing, then you're gonna get hits and misses. Whereas if you get the right kind of backer that's like, hey, I'm happy to take some of your sales revenue, but also give you loads of injection to make you grow, then you get, because for every FromSoft, you do have a, the Book of Boba Fett series, which was by all accounts a bit more iffy. Like it's not always a good thing. Yeah. And I think it then comes down to that stewardship decision of whoever is in charge. If they were gearing up to sell it, it's like making sure you sell it to the right person. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You can't just be like, nah, that'll do. It's like,
who's the guy? Is it Jon
Favreau? Jon Favreau.
Yeah, Jon Favreau. Yeah, he's basically the guardian of the galaxy in terms of the MCU, isn't he?
Well, he did Iron Man 1, and he did a couple of the other ones. Then moved and did The Mandalorian. So he moved within Disney to do some of the early Star Wars stuff.
I'm pretty sure he did Jungle Book. Like
he did, yeah.
He's done all sorts.
Yeah.
But isn't he?
Elf was his first film.
Great film.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think as a director, I'm pretty sure that's his first directorial.
Isn't there like an overseer of the MCU now? And I say this.
Oh, I know what you mean.
That might surprise some of you, but like I'm not actually a huge Marvel fan in general. I've seen pretty much all of them. I think some of them are brilliant, and I think some of them are not so brilliant. I tend to like more, the Wolverine sort of character arcs and stuff like that.
More a Logan kind of guy.
Yeah, more a Logan kind of guy. I really enjoyed Deadpool 1.
James Gunn, is that his name?
James Gunn was
director. I think it's Kevin Feige is what we're thinking of.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
He's kind of overseer from a studio.
Yeah.
But he was also completely ran phase 1 and phase 2 and all the Infinity War stuff. But he is now in charge of the stuff that's happening now, which he's getting more flack for. Depending on if you like or dislike some of the films.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think they're always going to have a challenge. I mean, obviously, I don't want to derail this too much, but I think they're always going to have a challenge when you lose, some pivotal cast members. Which, it's like once an audience has built a relationship with people like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Hopefully you've all seen. Well, I don't want to give a spoiler away.
I think that's the San Diego Comic-Con one.
No. It's the fact of what happens to Iron Man.
Oh, spoilers for Endgame, just in case. If you haven't seen it, go watch the whole series. Incredible.
Yeah. So obviously he sadly dies at the end of it, and then of course
that was good.
Captain America also passes away as well. He into retirement, very happy. So you've got two massive A-list stars, which have really, let's be honest, sort of the franchise has been built.
Yeah.
Captain America and Iron Man. Captain America and Iron Man were the big ones, hitters at the
Have you seen the San Diego Comic-Con reveal?
Yeah, he's now Doctor
Doom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I find it. You see that's a tactical move.
Yeah,
they're bringing him back.
Yeah, I'm presuming he'll be masked for the whole thing. They're not going to show his face.
Yeah,
you'd presume so.
Well, otherwise it's.
But then this is.
Otherwise, that's weird, isn't it?
But this is the funny thing, is I think this is the thing, a lot of people that sort of, and I know I will bring this back around to 40k, so bear with me. I think one of the things that, as a fan of Marvel and comic books in general, I think the issue they always were going to have with Marvel is the first few films were your heavy hitters, your Iron Mans, your Captain Americas, your Spider-Mans, all the stuff people wanted to see. Now imagine 30 years in the future, there's a Warhammer Cinematic Universe. The Space Marine film's done, the Guard film's done, the Sisters of Battle film is done, the Tau film's done.
Yeah.
What's Phase 4? The Kroot film.
Yeah.
Look, you tried, but it's not going to be as incendiary as those opening films because it's not quite as a popular faction. That's always going to be a problem. I think a lot of the flack they're getting is like, well, you are moving down the list of A-list heroes to sort of the more niche characters, which is cool if you're into them. If you're not,
I suppose though, this is another really interesting thing about the how good that IP looks to people.
Yeah.
Like if you've got studios that want to take all of that lore and my goodness, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like the whole of the heresy is there.
Yeah, man.
And they're not that there's not there's not much scrappy stuff in it. It's all meaty, thick lore, as we've established.
Waiting to be made into multiple series.
Like that is very appealing.
Yeah.
And that is like it would take hundreds of years to make series and movies about all of that stuff.
Well, you can imagine like the Taika Waititi Gazkul Thraka film. Do you know what I mean? It's got such a breadth of things to do. It is that kind of universe you can get lost in and make loads of media from. And also it's probably big enough to be like lots of contained stories, which is something that would be, it's quite exciting if that were ever to happen. If like you can do like one-offs and just leave them in their little pocket of universe and all the characters die. Sweet, move on.
You could do
Rogue
like,
Ones.
you could do a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 long series of Gaunt's Ghosts.
Yeah.
That's one tiny slither of the lore.
Yeah.
And if you get the story right and you humanize it and you get a good casting for it, like what a series that could be.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
You just make it like Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
Get HBO on and that's it.
Yeah.
Jobs are good.
What would be the difficult thing though, and I think, and is this something that sort of it almost is at odds with, like I've just said, it could also be a positive thing. It could open up all these doors. You could do all these cool things with the IP. But ultimately, we've talked about 10th edition a lot sort of recently on and off camera, of that, I think Old World was such an interesting development because it was so old school, if you will. And really kind of captured people. This is really fun, I spent like 500 points on a character. And I think there has been a lot of chat about that kind of missing from 40k and missing that granularity. This whole conversation about minimalizing and making something sellable also comes with would then it kind of move away from the game maybe? Would it become, is that almost a legacy part of the IP? Would you just sell toys and action figures and would it become too streamlined? Or would it get someone on board, it's like, cool, we've assembled, you no longer have 4 people in the rules team, here's 100. Like Wizards of the Coast. It goes from being like, here's a couple of people to here's a whole team of playtesters. It's a really interesting double-edged sword, isn't it? Would we lose some of the essence of the game?
How appealing are the miniatures and the game to people that potentially want to buy Games Workshop? Is anyone buying it for the miniatures and for the game? Is it more for the IP?
But maybe someone like Hasbro.
Well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It really, like...
Joy Toy's a great example.
Yeah,
they must be selling a tremendous amount of those Joy Toy figures because they bring one out every couple of weeks. I swear. There are so many and they are so vague and niche.
Scale's like what, this big?
I've got Dante, he's about this big. He's at action figure size.
Oh, okay, so about this big.
I thought they were really big like the McFarlane ones, but they're a little bit smaller.
You see, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I almost don't want to say it, but... If you were to try, I don't think you'll ever get away from the fact that there are people out there which love to build and paint miniatures.
100%.
Okay, that the hobby is what Games Workshop's been built on. Because let's face it, the game, has gone through varying editions in both any system they've done. And the game has proven multiple times, again and again, it's not balanced, it can be frustrating. Like the gamers themselves take a bit of a beating over the years. Like if you're in it for the long haul, you take it. But you know what?
Veterans of the long war.
Yeah, but I've always said, that's why I've said, meta slay is my thing. Don't chase the meta. Yeah, don't chase the meta.
Available right now, tabletop.tv. Get yours, and you can get it on a mug as well. You be the meta slayer you want to be.
Yeah,
I'll drink to that.
But that's my point. Like, collect what you like, and which ultimately I'm saying is put the hobby first.
Yeah.
Because if you like that army, which means you probably like that lore, and you enjoy building and painting, they can never ever take that away from you. That is yours. And if you just keep building up your collection, you're going to have editions and games where your army will come back in vogue. You'll always have all of the options. And, if you're into the gaming side of things, you're setting yourself up for success. But I will then caveat this by saying the people that do want to build and paint miniatures, it is still a niche. So if you're talking about a big commercial entity that wants to sell volume, it would naturally make sense. And some people are going to be, Lawrence, you can't say that, you can't do that. But you got to think of it like, imagine if they did Joy Toy style figures which are already pre-painted, and they just scale them down to the same size as the miniatures. Now, I don't know if they can actually achieve that from a a production manufacturing point of view. I mean, it would be a lot cheaper to produce because there's a lot less plastic, and perhaps they would have to take the posability away or whatever it is that comes with those things. But the point is that they've achieved something pretty awesome with Joy Toys, right? I mean, they look pretty good, right? They are ultimately just
scaled up minis,
3-ups of the scaled up minis, but they're painted. So now I buy an army which is fully painted. It's suddenly super accessible. Now the game is really accessible, like Magic the Gathering's really accessible. You buy the cards. Cool. I don't need to paint my card. I don't need to do any of that. I've got my cards. I can start playing. I buy my army. I can start playing. That is then maybe when you do have your 100-person rule team. With competitions around the world and goodness knows what. Could it be scaled to that? Yes. But I think weirdly, in order to scale it to that, it would, I don't want to say have to kill what has made it what it is, but that would become some sort of weird niche within the hobby. I don't know how they would do that.
Weirdly, I think you could go as far as to say it would kill what it is, because I've seen this, not argument, I guess discourse is probably the best way to describe it. Time and time again in, I think even Hobby Vices, you posted something great on your Instagram story a little while ago about this whole, the 10 points you get for painting in a competitive game. And it's a real contentious point, right? Of like, it's such a ridiculous rule. It's like, the reason why I think it's sometimes quite important to have that is if you suddenly could have a pre-painted army, right? And you just buy the thing straight out of the box, you lose the bit that for me is what makes Warhammer Warhammer, and why it's an IP that is so strong. Is because you start with a box of nothing essentially, and you invest through hundreds of hours your story. The stories and videos and films and TVs and books are only there because they help you get excited about painting that model. Right? And to go full circle, I think there is still a weird through line financially for a company is like you've kind of got someone on the hook for more than just a 20 quid cinema ticket or a $80 video game. You've got them in for paints, you've got them in for more models, you've got them in for lore. You've got, weirdly, it is actually quite fertile ground to make a real lifestyle customer rather than a drop in, drop out person. That can be seen as slightly cynical, however you want to look at it. But I think that essence of, I want to paint them, my Space Marines yellow because I love the Imperial Fists and I like Dawn and I like all of those things. That helps make the world so rich. And as soon as you're like, blip, Space Marines come in blue, plastic, there you go. That's lost, and you do get into a meta chaser. You're playing the game. The game is extrapolated away from the lore. And maybe you lose what makes Warhammer to an extent.
Well, I think you do. If you do that. But I mean, I'm talking about this in a buyout scenario. Like you could see a company going, but yes, there is going to be 1 million people, that will buy, build, and paint these miniatures. But if I sell the armies already made and already coloured, and they look really good, that 1 million people becomes 20 million people that buy. The maths don't lie. Because yes, those 1 million people, they might buy your paints and they might, but if you've got 20 million people,
it's still 20 million.
And I don't know, look, they're made up figures, it's all nonsense, okay? But you get my point. And 100%. They could even go a step further, just like McFarlane did, if you want it in uncoloured, you can still paint it.
So
you can.
How many of those were sold compared to the pre-painted one? When you think about it, actually, like the out of the box one was way more popular, wasn't it?
But here's the interesting thing: why not both? If you're a big company coming in and you wanted to expand that part of the business, if you've got very clever people in marketing, you could do both. Because I'm seeing a lot of people at the moment, there's a few things popping into my head. A lot of people at the moment in our hobby that are getting into Gundam because they've got some very, very, very clever kits where stuff articulates and moves. A lot of it's pre-painted really cool. on the sprue. It's very, very cool. And I can see why that's so popular. We recently did a video about our special edition Titus bus that we were kindly given from Focus.
Oh, it's a really good example.
I've seen so many people in the comments like, why did they not? Why I can't believe it's not painted. I
can't believe it.
All that money that's not painted, and because they didn't know. But there's so many collector's editions where you get a bust and it's painted, and they just didn't know, and they therefore don't know about the joy of the hobby itself.
Yeah.
So if you're coming into like pre-acquisition, Games Workshop is sending in your best marketing people.
Yes.
And someone comes up with a great idea of we're going to do pre-made miniatures, armies. You can fill a cabinet with them, play a game with them straight out of the box. Amazing. Or you can go down the hobby route and you can do it all the traditional way.
Yes.
Why not do both?
Yeah.
Well, I think they could do both. I agree. And you would hope that they would do both.
Yeah.
But I would be scared, I suppose is what I'm trying to say, is that, you know, if this large corporation, you know, did a buyout, that they would go, well, but this just makes us objectively way more money. There's no need to support and have a team, you know, producing or focusing on any of this hobby-related stuff when we could just pre-produce it.
But I suppose there's a proven track record with Warhammer miniatures.
And
Since
also,
the 80s, people have been buying those miniatures en masse for decades.
Yeah, so it should be fine.
well, weirdly, what would almost give me hope would be, or sort of a little bit of security or safety would be like, if you are a company like Hasbro, you've got the pre-painted, sell it, play it, tied up.
Yeah.
That's your bread and butter, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Sell millions of that every day. Whereas weirdly, if you were to acquire something, it's generally speaking to shore up or go into a market you are not prevalent in, but you can market it better and get more revenue from it. If they're like, well, we don't have hobby stuff, really. They might be like, well, we haven't been able to, you know, who are the people that do like the Spitfires and stuff? Airfix and like Mattel and things like that. Like they're all under another banner. So they might be like, well, we don't own that property.
Yeah.
Games Workshop over here, and we do action figures and stuff. Down, we do toys, sold. Whereas actually, we want to compete with Mattel and Airfix and those kind of companies. Yeah. You buy them out, and then you're like, cool, we also have both parts of the market. And weirdly, it would be almost a prime one to be like, well, we won't do, we'll keep it as a hobby product.
Yes.
Because that helps tick our hobby numbers up. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It kind of maybe
they could
would
still then add on the
be other ways to get involved.
I mean, I would be. Oh, this is really controversial to say. For me, it would be almost better in some ways that you could buy some pre-painted, pre-produced armies, because having been, to many events, I've met all sorts of players, for all sorts of reasons that they're into the hobby, and actually I've met a lot of people which are not hobbyists. They're not what I would call hobbyists. Okay. They are, which is fine, by the way. This is not dissing them in any way. This is just saying they're not hobbyists, and they're self-admitted not hobbyists. Okay, they hate painting. They can't stand it. It's the most boring, laborious. Chef is a really good example. He's right here with it. He hates painting. He's not interested in it. He doesn't feel he's good at it. He doesn't want to do it. He even jokes all the time. I'm not a hobbyist, not me. He says that all the time. Okay, he doesn't like building and painting the miniatures, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, he has done so out of necessity in the past, and that's what I found with. I'm not going to say a lot of tournament players. A portion of tournament players that I've met, I don't know what the statistics are. They would be better off served with an army which actually looks quite nice being put on the table, because some of the things I've had put on the table in front of me when I'm spending hours the night before, up till 2 a.m, like painstakingly, I've got to make sure my basic's all done. And you turn up to the table and it's like, okay. And you go, oh, well, I wish it was pre-painted at that point, because it would just look nicer and feel more immersive, because ultimately I always come at it from the hobby side, the narrative side. I want, the role player in me wants to be immersed in a world. That's why we've got a venue downstairs where we've got Fletcher painting all of this beautiful terrain, which is custom built, so that you go to the table and this is not, MDF terrain or styrofoam stuff. It's like, this is an immersive world that we're in, and so trying to curate that hobby, side of it. So in a way, it would actually be a great offering for the people that are just pure gamers, that don't care about that side of things. To have they could then put a really good looking army on the board and play the game.
And it'd also allow you, if you did enough of a pre-painted thing, even if it comes like Gundam
painted
comes
terrain.
in. Pre-painted. Well, Gundam comes in as my understanding is, it comes in the colours of plastic. So where it's supposed to be red, it'll be red plastic. Where it's white plastic. If you did that with Space Marines, if you want the red pre-plastic ones, you could then enhance them. You could put battle damage on. You could do markings. Weirdly, you could do all the boring bits, which are base coating, and it's done. And you can just do all the fun bits, all the edge highlights, all the extra stuff, if you wanted to. It comes battle ready. You do all the fun bits, as it were, on top if you want to enhance that thing. Yeah, weirdly, we might bring him around here, maybe.
I mean, here's the thing. Even if they did do that, I'm probably the guy that would still buy it grey and paint
this is why
because I need to feel that ownership.
Yes, 100%. Me too.
This is why I think like a why not both kind of thing.
But yeah, exactly. Right, why not both?
Yeah.
You're just sort of widening your potential market.
Yeah.
Some people have collected them. I saw a fascinating thing on Instagram the other day. Dave Bautista.
Yeah.
Well, I love Dave Bautista.
Yeah, he's awesome.
When he was a wrestler, and I think he's been excellent in lots of films.
Yeah, he has, yeah.
He collects lunchboxes.
Yes, I saw that same thing.
And he's just like, I don't want to misquote, but he's basically just saying, there's just a real joy in collecting stuff.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm just choosing to collect, amongst other things.
Yeah.
Some people just love collecting stuff.
Yeah.
So why not do pre-painted, pre-built Space Marines?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not make a different type of game where all the miniatures are bigger and you play something akin to Kill Team or Boarding Action with larger miniatures, which are pre-painted, pre-built, ready to go, straight out the box.
Yeah, and they could do limited edition skins. This is the Aurora Space Marine chapter.
Yes.
Limited run to 2,000 army sets or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like there's so much you can monetize from it.
There's a huge collector's market, a resellers market. It's there's plenty of Japanese games publishers that make tons of miniature ranges that would be quite an interesting pick to buy something like Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Expand the video games, expand the miniatures offering.
Also, the technology on everything's it's just getting so crazy.
Yeah.
You know, like there's color 3D printing now.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And you know, obviously people have multiple videos out there talking about how 3D printing is going to be the death of Games Workshop. Well, now I know quite a lot about 3D printing because I can 3D print. I know to a degree that there is some truth to that, but the reality is the cleanup process and the actual production of something does take, a fair amount of time and work, and it's not quite that simple. And also then you need the capital to buy the 3D printer, and you need a space, and while there's fumes, we're not there yet. I know there's some people say that we are, but that's not the case. And also,
anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think, actually, the majority of people don't want to spend the time doing that. What they want is the immediate hit of, I've bought the army box, it's already on the sprue for me, all I need to do is clip it out, they want that immediate hit, and then what happens is they buy the army box, they don't open it, and they don't get round to it, and then they buy the next thing, and it becomes a pile of shame. That's what every true hobbyist does, right?
Also, what an interesting way to hook more people in.
Yeah.
Imagine you got a mate, and you're like, they are never, ever going to get a box of Space Marines and get them built and painted. Because they don't have time, don't have the interest, whatever, not for them.
Yeah.
Here's your pre-painted ones.
Yeah.
Play a few games, they're like, this is amazing. Right. And then they're like, maybe I should get some of the ones on the sprue.
Right.
Some paints.
Yeah, you might actually inspire them.
Yeah.
But I like the fact I can buy these Ultramarines out the box, but I really want to make them Black Templars.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. Yeah, you can fully see that being the new way in.
Maybe we should buy Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Have a rummage around.
All of our billions.
A quick whip round.
I was going to say, with that whole colour 3D printing, and I don't, the manufacturing process for these Joy toys and stuff, obviously technology is going to come to the point where I'm sure that if they're not able to scale it down now, although I can't see a reason why they couldn't.
I suppose with the joints, the articulation would be difficult to do smaller, I guess.
But I mean, even like when we were growing up, like little magnet men and the G.I. Joes, I mean, I'm sure they could make it work if they really wanted to.
Maybe there's some...
And then you're clicking weapons.
And I think there's also an element of artistry of that. I know a lot of people talk about the 3D printing, like, that's going to be the end of Games Workshop. That's the equivalent of like saying, well, now you can code on your computer. Well, that's the end of computer games, isn't it? Because you can make them yourself. Well, no. Like the artistry and the work and the effort that goes into something. Yeah. Because it does always make me laugh. It's like, oh yeah, but it's like, yes, because you've ripped off the IP and you're 3D printing it yourself. You haven't created Space Knights. That's not yours.
There's plenty of examples of ranges of miniatures that have quite clearly been made to copy Games Workshop IPs.
Yeah.
Like huge ranges.
Yes.
Basically model for model. There's
straight rips.
There's a replacement offering.
Yeah.
But they're still selling plenty of Space Marines.
Yeah.
Of course. And because no matter what you say, well, actually that's not true because it's all completely subjective, isn't it? But I would argue from my point of view that, those models, while some of the knockoffs are extremely good, don't get me and yes, maybe almost as good in some cases.
Yeah.
almost as good. By large and wide, they are not as good. So you are getting something which is not as nice as...
Especially when they're clearly ripping the Warhammer IP.
Yes.
When you see stuff that is unique...
I completely agree.
It's very different.
Yeah, I've actually seen some incredible unique stuff, which I go, that's as good as Games Workshop. Yeah. But also partly because it's not trying to be Games Workshop.
It's its own thing, right?
And actually that gives it a level of authenticity where I immediately go, oh, that's really, and the detail is incredible. And there are incredible digital artists out there now, and it's easier than ever to get out there and produce this sort of stuff, which is fantastic.
That's great.
Because in my opinion, and this has been true for decades now, Games Workshop needs an honest competitor to keep them honest.
Exactly.
Because the ultimate reason, valid justification for anyone going, well, my 3D printer goes brr, is that the prices of Games Workshop are really high. Yeah. And you know, I understand that that's just not accessible for a lot of people. And so that's when you go, right, well, I can't afford the Games Workshop Space Marine Army, so I'm going to print my Space Knight army anyway. But it's even then you go, oh, but you have then probably just spent 400 quid on a 3D printer setup. So, you know, it kind of all starts falling apart a little bit, you know. you know. Yeah. So it's all choice. It's all choice. And it's good to have lots of choice.
It's great to have lots of choice. And I think that's with the whole, you know, it's like a sliding doors moment in the universe of this Games Workshop can be an independent company for decades to come. Or it could be bought by someone. But I think it's that thing of like, they equally will have to have a choice and think about what they want to do. And I think that there's lots of different options that even just discussing it now, a lot of really exciting things. Yes. I think it can easily, something like that can be met with like doom and gloom of like, this is the end times, it's going to be rubbish, it's all over. But I think even some of the decisions they've made recently, and we discussed in the previous podcast about the Sanguinary Guard. Yeah. They're still making very good models. It's just there's lots of expectation and stuff, and I think they are still trying their best to be the best. Yeah. I don't think at any point we're saying
I don't love the Sanguinary Guard though.
I know, but I still think in terms of they're still making good models in terms of like really pushing the envelope.
Still
like,
make
the amount
the
of detail, the amount of effort, the amount of love poured into their product. I think it would be very remiss of anyone to suddenly say like, oh, they don't care about the IP anymore, because they clearly do, I think.
There are no companies that get hit every time.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at Apple, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're making some of the best technology in the world, but like the last few iPhones have been very similar. Yeah. Rather than people being like, look at this new feature, they're like, it's the same as the last 4 of them. Yeah. Apple aren't like purposefully making rubbish technology.
No. It's not the same. It's got a different number after the M processor.
That is true.
Well, also that again, almost weirdly, you make a kind of a you make your own. Ben, you have to line it with Apple of that they have pushed the envelope so far. It's now harder and harder to see the difference.
It's more difficult to impress people now these days as well.
Yeah, it's way harder to impress people, and it's suddenly become way more of a like, well, it's less perceivable to the end user. Yeah. And same with Games Workshop. Someone is there probably being like, the fact we've managed to do that kind of level of detail on that shoe buckle on that Cities of Sigmar person is an incredible advancement. And they're all like, oh my God, I can't believe we've done that. Goes out to public. No one notices. And they're like, oh, I think the model's actually getting worse. And it's like, well, actually, like objectively, they're pushing the boundaries more. It's just, we have higher and higher expectations of Games Workshop. And I think...
Do you know what I would like? Do you know what this whole conversation has circled round to me?
Yeah.
Whether a buyout ever happened in the future or not, fine, okay. I think what I'm lacking and what would probably make a lot of hobbyists feel more secure and not panic if something like was bought out like that, is that I want some faces. I want to put names to faces of those caretakers, those custodians. I want to know who my John Blanche of the modern era is. Yes. I want to know who my Andy Chambers of the modern era is, who my Rick Priestley is, who is truly the law keeper, if you like, the holder of the IP keys, the overseer, and or the creative director, whatever you want to call him, of the modern Warhammer 40,000 universe. And who are the artists? And give them the credit, please. You know, your Darren Lathams. Yeah. You know, put them back on the map. put them front and center, let them discuss with the community and the hobby, because also, like any artist, if they get great idea from feedback and they're allowed to actually interact, they might produce that and come up with something really cool. Don't lock them away behind a corporate gate, which no one's, it's all very mysterious, and that's what I feel like we're lacking.
It's lacking that transparency.
And that's what would make you nervous with a sellout, because you're like, well, who's creatively looking after this? Well, we don't know because they won't tell us.
If you knew their track record and the decisions they've made, you'd be like, well, I kind of trust them on what they've done thus far.
Disney's bought this, but John Blanche is still in charge of this next thing. You go, oh, all right then, cool. And they've just given John Blanche, trillions of pounds. Okay,
But again, like if you compare Games Workshop to other companies, it's actually quite weird that they're not doing that.
Right.
Because a lot of the time, go back to Apple, for instance.
Johnny Ives?
Yeah, well, Johnny Ive is a big face. You've got Tim Cook in the front of every single Apple presentation.
Yes.
You've got all the VPs there selling their new products.
Yes.
It's the same with all of Apple's competitors. We talked about Kevin Feige earlier on. He's the face.
Yes.
There's faces, but for Games Workshop, they just seem to hide everyone away.
Yeah.
And it's really weird.
Yeah.
I kind of like how 40k it is. Like almost like there's maybe
the Imperium.
behind the door marked CEO. They think the CEO's in there and he's tied into the Astronomicon, and no one's seen him in thousands of years.
It's the Lords of Terror, isn't it? This ephemeral board that we talk about.
No one actually knows who's in charge anymore. Everyone's assuming.
It's quite strange. There's definitely we've talked about this recently in the podcast as well. There is a very, very big lack of transparency with Games Workshop.
Yeah.
They don't seem to want to give anything away for any kind of reason, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
Everything's sort of shrouded for no real reason that I can really discern. It's odd.
I think that they probably, I think it's all done under the guise of protecting the artists, isn't it?
Of course.
I understand that, because there's some pretty nasty backlash with whenever you put anything out online, and it's horrible. It's there are real people behind these things. It's why we try and actually give, we try and focus on the positive and have a moderated point of view, because you gain nothing by saying this person produced the ugliest thing in the world and I hate them, and it's like that's ridiculous.
And I agree, but is it almost encouraging that kind of behaviour because they're just flinging insults at no one?
Yeah.
This is my point. I hate this, it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
If there was a face to it and they're like, oh, Johnny Artist has done this one, it'd be like, oh, I like Johnny Artist.
Yes.
I'll calibrate
It's not his best, you know what I mean?
And I think, all of the names that I mentioned, like Darren Latham, Juan Diaz, like these amazing sculptors, that have a lot of love from the community, are celebrated. I think you always have to go, well, the good that comes out of it far outweighs that small percentage of
100%.
toxic negativity. I would like to see the artists back front and centre,
100%,
and then I would feel comfortable with any potential
Just
buyer.
a bit more transparency, please. That's all we ask for.
I still think we should buy Games Workshop.
Yes, I will. I will attempt to do that with my lack
Give
of
us a
money.
call.
Ring now. Put number at the bottom of the screen.
3 gold pieces and a firm handshake.
I think I've got a tenner in my pocket.
We've got loads of bread.
There's nice birthday cake downstairs. We could offer him a slice.
What's that?
That would sweeten the deal.
That would sweeten the deal. Ooh, nice. See what you did there. Nice. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for a wonderful conversation. As per usual, I have been James Jordan, aka The Bard, and I've been joined by Mr. Lawrence Baker, the Spider.
Oh.
No jazz hands on the way out? There we go. That's what people want to see. Joe Pointing, Kelsey Lord Beard.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. It really freaks me out when you do that, and it kind of puts me on tilt. Anyway, until next time, we've been Tabletop Tactics, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.